But besides straws, what we do ultimately is to convert and study agricultural waste and byproduct and transform them into disposable items that are 100% compostable. Right, so I think the whole company, what we look at is definitely simplest process to reduce any kind of chemicals added into it, and also electricity utilization to put it the most minimum. Definitely looking at some other alternative power supply as well. So basically all about ESG. That's what we do.
Hi everyone, my name is Tarek. I'm the founder of ERTH. ERTH is the digital platform that helps households and businesses recycle their used electronics. We provide free pickup service and cash rewards. And according to the Malaysian Department of Environment in 2021, we became the #1 direct collector of e-waste in Malaysia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hardesh. I'm the managing partner of Bawatana. Bawatana, we are actually investors. We have a fund. The fund is called Jati, and through Jati, we deploy capital in early stage Malaysian companies. And as a result of that, obviously, as part of our decision making in terms of how we invest and who we invest in, we obviously consider sustainability and ESG. So that's the sort of a relation in terms of capital and how do we build an economy that is more inclined with sustainability.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Izwan. 5 years ago, after being a corporate lawyer, working in a large firm, advising large multinational companies that wants to go for public listing, I decided to do my own thing. So 5 years ago, I started Izwan Partners. And since I couldn't find a law firm that I actually wanted, so I thought that's why I have to sit down and do it myself. And we try to do things differently. We're very specific about what we do. We work with startup generally, whether you're trying to do business or raise capital. Generally, most of our clients are people that met an event like this. They got an idea and they want to set up a company, so we help them look for a company secretary, raising the first angel round and seed rounds. Obviously, ESG is no longer even a trend, it's something that is already here. And as a company, which is an early stage company, what we try to do is to try and encourage them to create the awareness. At the same time, looking at some of the simple things that they could implement, and that's the additional value creation that we try to add as a service provider, as legal counsel in the early stage startup space.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. So since Izwan, you're holding the mic, maybe you can answer the first question for everyone, that you can pass it down. So everyone's journey is very unique. Why, can you share like a bit of like, why did you choose to go down this route of integrating ESG and sustainability within the things that you do?
Well, Michelle, you guys ask very difficult questions. I mean, as a lawyer, it is very difficult when you ask somebody who's a lawyer what is important, because every lawyer will generally tell you everything is important. And that's obviously not particularly good advice when it comes to ESG, and I'm sure most of everybody here would have sat down and tried to read up a thing or two, and it can be very overwhelming if you're just reading it for the first time. I think for us, what we spoke earlier in our introduction, our value creation is really trying to demystify and make things more simplified. I think that's something that your organization is also doing at Fuller. And I think there have been some progress in major jurisdiction on making things more simplified. I think we need to have some localization, and that's something that we're also working on. I think generally the awareness among companies are still poor, especially in complying with even the existing regulations. And I think I'm trying to say this in the nicest way possible, with all love and affection to all of you fellow aspiring entrepreneurs or even startups. But we can't talk about ESG if we can't even solve the basic stuff in terms of complying with existing laws that exist. So you can't be a good corporate citizen if you've not been declaring your income tax. You cannot be a good employer if you've not been doing the necessary payments to your staff and so on. So those are something that the basic things that we're doing. So on top of that, we're trying to guide companies so that they can go through the path, especially setting up the ESG agenda at the outset. So that's something that I just want to put it out there as an initial introduction.
Okay, so my view is a bit more personal. In fact, it's very personal to me. I think, so just drawing off from the topic, right, it's about sustainability innovation. And I think when you talk about sustainability, a lot of times, also when you look at how we got here and why we got here, a lot of blame is placed on technology or the technology that we used to use. I think very important for us to understand is the way forward to create a sustainable future is actually to innovate even more. You cannot separate innovation from achieving what we want to achieve. You really need to focus on a lot of innovation, a lot of technology. Now, why I do what I do and how I embed it in what we do in terms of our decision making and even why we exist is because I believe there has not been a time in my lifetime or our lifetime where we will have a chance to really invest and build wealth, not just for ourselves, but for society as well. So this is really a lifetime opportunity because you're looking at entire ecosystems that you have to innovate again, you have to rebuild, you have to rethink, and that experience or that opportunity is really once in a lifetime opportunity. So that's why I set up a fund and I deploy capital because of what we can do with it and what it can mean for me and what it can mean for society.
Thanks. I've been a serial entrepreneur for the last 20 years. I spent most of my life in Europe, in Finland. I'm a Finnish citizen. I don't look like it, but I am. Finland is voted the greenest country on earth. Our recycling rate is quite high. Our electronic recycling rate is also high. So that would not be the place to start an e-waste collection business. I became interested in sustainability around 2015. I was at the time collaborating with a Finnish university on developing a device that can be deployed in African villages to give solar power to nearby residents and so on. So we actually won a few innovation awards for that device, and then the prize of one of those contests was to meet some of the sovereign wealth funds of Europe to invest in deploying these devices. So at that time I prepared a very nice projection that within 3 years we deploy 1,000 devices, within 5 years 10,000 devices. And then a gentleman from one of the sovereign wealth funds told me, you want my money to deploy these devices, can you guarantee that after 25 years there will be a proper e-waste recycling in those villages? Or will you go around and collect back those devices after they break down 25 years later? And of course I can't make that commitment because that would be very cost prohibitive to do so. So he said, well, in that case, I don't think I will invest in your company because you are solving a 25-year problem by creating a 250-year problem. Because when your device becomes e-waste, it contaminates the soil and the water and the air, then that's a much bigger problem. And that was the moment when I realized that, okay, I'm not a solar entrepreneur, I'm a sustainability entrepreneur. So if this is the more urgent problem, then why don't I start to solve this? So fast forward a year later, I read on National Geographic that China banned the import of e-waste from around the world, which it has been doing for 2 decades. And much of those containers that used to go to China from the first world started to come to Malaysia. And I have visited Malaysia before. So I flew here in summer of 2018 with my co-founder, who also happens to be my wife. And having the Finnish background, of course, I obviously wanted to start to see whether there's something I can do in this space. So I went to Loyang Plaza. So I went floor by floor, and then finally I met a very nice gentleman called Mr. Lim. Mr. Lim has been a phone dealer for the last 25 years. When he found out that I came from Finland, he opened the door to the storage of his shop, and there was boxes up to the ceiling full of old, broken Nokia phones that he has kept for such a long time. And I asked him, oh my God, I've never seen so many phones in one place. Why do you keep all these? He said, it's e-waste, I can't sell them anymore, no one wants them anymore. but I know that this is harmful for the environment, so I don't dump them downstairs like all my peers. I don't give them to the uncle who collects the newspapers or whatever, because I know that that might be processed in not the right way, which will then, the residual waste after that improper procedure will be probably in the river or in the forest or something. So he said, I just keep it here for now, I don't know what to do with it. So I asked him to give me 1 day. So I just Googled all the licensed, I went to the Bawatana Alam Sekitar website, I found a list of proper recyclers. I contacted them one by one until I found one who was ready to recycle mobile phones. So I went the next day to Loyal Plaza and I gave Mr. Lim 1,000 USD. At that time I haven't changed my money yet, so I gave him 1,000 USD and I bought the entire batch, went down, put it in a Grab, and then the Grab straight to the factory, and in that day I earned 2,000 USD. Yes. So that's why I'm doing this.
That's very interesting. Right, mine goes even way earlier. I received this question a lot, frankly. So when I trace back, I remember when I was very much younger, everyone would be asked, hey, what would you like to do when you grow up? Right? You get answers like doctors, lawyers, those very typical ones. Right? And I was so gung-ho, I told my mom, I want to save the animals. And she was like, no, please save yourself. I'll never allow that. Right? So this is a very typical Asian mindset where don't think about saving anything else if you don't even know how to save yourself. Right? So of course, that didn't dampen my spirit. But what happened is that I just kept looking for various ways which I can contribute, whether it's at that point of time, there was no such thing as ESG, but now we know environment, social, right? So those are two things that I started working on. And the new ones, of course, we include governance, which means how do we make sure there's proper red tapes, proper policies and all those. So back then, there was no such thing. So, of course, then it brought me along to an entrepreneurial journey where I started various social enterprises. I guess you've heard of this phrase. Right, it was like about 10 years ago, all kinds of social enterprises were trend until everything is like replaced with ESG. So this is how I started dabbling more into it. We were looking to solve, bottom line is always to solve a problem, right? As a startup, what problem we're trying to solve? We're trying to solve the electronic waste, right? So I was trying to solve social problems, environmental problems, and that's why same goes to Origo. It's actually both sides of waste that we're trying to solve. The agriculture waste, there's actually goal, right? So like for example, rice husk, last time, the milling factories will have to pay someone to get rid of the waste. But now everyone's queuing at the door to buy the husk. Why? Because it can be converted into biomass, biofuel and whatnot. Right? So they've got that side of waste, and we have tons and tons of plastic waste. Right? So this plastic waste, no one knows how to get rid of it except to just either incinerate or bury. Right? That's why then we came up with ways to actually convert into compost soil that we can then return back to the farmers again to be used. So it is a very beautiful, I think now the trend, I won't say a trend, all this while it should be looking at circular economy. How can we make sure whatever that we use can be returned back for a good purpose? That's how we can get out of waste. Right, so that's roughly my journey.
All right. Give a round of applause to all of them. Thank you so much for sharing. I think like if we put all of you in the maturity level, all of you are level 5 individual, very purposeful. Okay, so Seau, since you're holding the mic as well, you mentioned a little bit about the origins of Origo. Could you share a bit more of like what was the thought process to create the straws? What came first? Was it the solution or the problem that you saw?
Well, it all started when government launched no plastic straw before COVID. Do you guys still remember that? There was such a big hoo-ha. All the F&B outlets were scrambling around. No plastic straws, what do we use? Right? So that's when my partner, YT, actually he's very knowledgeable in engineering and machineries and whatnot. So he came up, he studied and found out that, hey, he can use agriculture waste to convert into straws rather than just paper straws. Because paper straws, at the end of the day, it still contains plastic. Right? It's just a temporary solution that was coined by some genius just to solve the plastic straw problem. Right? It's not the ultimate solution. So we don't do anything in between. What we come up with is confirm, number one, no synthetic additives that are harmful, no polymer, no resin, no acid, no preservatives added into this. because we need to return back to the soil, I need to pass it back to the farmers, right? We don't want plants that are contaminated due to all this compost, right? So the thought process is actually the problem. We fall in love with problems, right? That's why we then find all sorts of creative ways to solve that problem. Because if I fall in love with my solution, it's not very ideal because we can't be doing all these straws. There's still tons and tons of waste, whether it's the agriculture side or even the plastic waste side. So I would say, I think problem first, then the solution.
Okay, so follow up from that, sorry. We have a question from Slido, from one of your straw users.
Okay.
Any plans to make the straw melt slower?
So, can. Yes, exactly. I can always add resin and plastic in it. So I always tell everyone, we are so spoiled by the most magical invention, plastic, that can last forever and it costs nothing, literally nothing, right? Nothing in terms of monetary, but plentiful in terms of our earth, right? We're so spoiled, so we do a lot of education because anything that's natural, we can't. There are a few things that we can never solve. Someone's transparent looking cups and all those. Can you identify something in nature that's transparent? Nothing, right? So if I want to make it transparent, I got to process it. So that's against our policy, right? Second one is, how do you make it last like days? I can't. Anything organic food, won't you be afraid if it stays in your tummy for like days? It has to disappear, right? So these are all the expectations that before I pass samples to clients, I will share like a product sheet. Please expect that it can last only in drinks for 2 hours. Right, after that, always go up to Coffee Bean, ask for a second straw. It can help me with my revenue, right? That's the whole idea, actually. But jokes aside, it can't last that long, frankly. Yeah, unfortunately. So this is a mindset I think everyone, we have to change because we're so used to plastic that can last for 500 years and 1,000 years, right?
Thank you so much. Okay, I'll pass the mic to Izwan. Okay, so Izwan, just now you were mentioning to be an entrepreneur, you need to fulfill certain minimum regulations or minimum compliance that you need to do. You need to file taxes, you need to do all this, right? But then, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm very entrepreneurial spirited, very innovative. I want things to be fast. Sometimes I can be too into thinking about building up my solution that I forget everything else. How can startups or entrepreneurs keep that innovative spirit while ensuring that they comply to regulations, and on top of this, looking into future ESG sustainability regulations as well?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it, Michelle? I mean, unfortunately, there isn't really a straightforward answer because every company operates differently, just like what we are here today listening to both Mo and Seau also sharing their experiences. In other words, different businesses will have different set of ESG challenges, and therefore, as an entrepreneur, I think as a business itself, when you are a startup, it is very convenient or easy for us to simply define startup as a bunch of 3-4 people inside a room working on trying to create a product or service which may likely be a tech-enabled. But if you're looking at it from a social science perspective, it's really a human institution trying to create a product or service in an extreme conditions of uncertainty. So the risk-taking aspect of a startup needs to exist, but at the same time, there needs to be alignment of interest, not just on the decision level as a founder, to have an appreciation of the importance of ESG, but at the same time, having to balance this competing interest between growth maximization, because ultimately, startup is valued based on the ability for them to retain customers, for them to be able to generate revenue, and having external stakeholders in terms of investors that is aligned in terms of this expectation will be the key. So generally, financial investors, when we talk about financial investors, we're talking about VCs, in the traditional sense, invest in expectation of profit, and they have very limited time of ownership in the business, and they can't wait too long, unlike the impact investors or patient capital, as what we will say. And the investment contracts that the investors sign have very extensive control over the business, and therefore the founders may likely have to abide by these terms. And the point that we're trying to make here is that there is a need to balance between the need to grow and a lot of the time as legal counsel we work with early stage entrepreneurs. We understand that they need to make decisions sometimes with very little or few information, that they can't spend 6 months looking at the SWOT analysis or the pros and cons because they need to capture the market or specific industry and they need the first mover advantage. So what we're trying to do, or what we were trying to get the entrepreneurs to appreciate is the fact that ESG is not a mere box ticking exercise as what you highlighted in your deck earlier, Michelle, but it's part of the entire business process. So essentially, is really what Hardesh also mentioned earlier, is really looking at the business model and embedding ESG as part of the business and having that mindset change is going to be the key. And I think generally the founders need to sit down and really assess their own competency, because they can be very overwhelming to look at different acronyms, SASB, GRI, TSPD, and you can go the whole day arguing about all these things and which one is better and whatnot. And even among the regulation space, something which we'll cover shortly, is also a bit of a mixture. So the point that we're trying to make here is that we need to assess the risk and really manage the risk, and we can see how even large companies like Facebook have very low ESG ratings simply because they don't respect privacy laws and issues regarding transparency about how data is being collected, whether or not the data that is collected is actually necessary for the purpose of the business they operate. So ESG is important in that sense, and if you're a young company, you really want to get this thing right when you're starting out.
Thank you so much, Izwan. I think that will lead into the next question for Hardesh as well. As an impact focus like VC and funder, what are the criteria that you look at when scoping out and assessing startups? How can startups also make themselves more attractive to attract funds, impact funds?
I'll try to frame this slightly differently, but purely to really try and give value to your question. To be honest, actually, and I'll be very honest, I don't think startups can do much. And the reason for that is because I don't believe it is their job to be solving this problem. We have to understand when we talk about sustainability and we talk about the world as it is right now and the problems that we're trying to solve, we have to make a difference between the companies that have been around for the past 50, 60, 100 years and the nature of their business, and the nature of the businesses that we have today that are being birthed today. So we have actually two very good examples here. I don't think any of them started with the issue of compliance. When you look at your chart, they started with a purpose, but there are competitors who started maybe 50, 60 years ago, like plastic straw manufacturers, or even like mobile phone manufacturers. They are the ones who have the burden of answering compliance, because they are the ones who have to change their model, probably change their entire systems, invest in that. These guys don't have the problem. So to answer your question, what we do is we look for companies that we think mirror how companies should look like, how businesses should look like today and moving into the future. So if you're not doing anything that's purposely harming the environment, that is really the only thing that we look for. This bigger question about carbon and all that, it is not something for startups to answer, because most startups barely emit any carbon, except that if you rent an office and then the office runs on electricity that comes from coal, yes, but it's not really your problem. You can't solve it, right? It's something that the grid has to solve, the country has to solve. So I think there's this risk of death by compliance. When we look at startups, we just look at whether we think they have the right purpose, The people have the right spirit, they understand the issues, they are investing in building the kind of companies that we need for the future. As long as they tick those general boxes, we will definitely look at them. So actually it's a lot easier than people tend to make it out to be.
Thank you so much, Hardesh. I think just to echo your point as well, I think earlier you mentioned about being innovative. I think startups definitely have the upper hand to be innovative in this space in order to disrupt what is being traditionally done. So for example, like Origo, disrupting that whole space within plastic straws and everything, and also for mold as well. Because startups, we are much more agile. We have much more quicker turnarounds compared to, let's say, a 40, 50-year-old company. And we, I think, need, and we have that power to provide those solutions that are not currently existing within the ecosystem to complement what is already being done. Yeah, so definitely agree on your point. We have a few questions on Slido. I'll open this up to anyone who would like to answer. Okay. Everyone is too concentrated on the E in ESG. Any business good example for the S or G?
Can I take it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I hope everyone understood that the irony of what I was saying earlier. Obviously, we don't do this just to make money, but we understood that the waste generator will exist. The global average recycling rate is 17.4%, so 82.6% is unaddressed properly. Here in Malaysia, the average is slightly higher, 25-26%. Still, the ultimate majority goes to landfill or illegal processing. So if it's so easy to just provide this missing link between waste generator and the existing infrastructure, the proper licensed recyclers, that is actually the low-hanging fruit. That is the very powerful action that we can provide. And I think that Malaysia, it's just a matter of willpower. If we want to double the recycling rate from 35 to 50% overnight, this is theoretically possible. We just all have to go back home and make, for example, a booking with ERTH or with whoever else, then go to the office and do the same, and then suddenly the e-waste recycling rate of Malaysia would double. But since this question says, oh, you guys talking about only about E, where is the S and where is the G? Well, let me tell you. Let's start with the G, that's the big one. If you look at the Global E-Waste Monitor, this is published by the United Nations University every couple of years. You go to they track like 200 countries, the e-waste recycling, formal recycling and so on. You go to the line of Malaysia, they will write there, Malaysia, the population, the amount of e-waste generated per capita, and then what is the amount that is formally recycled, that is documented, NA, no one knows. Even the Jabatan Alam Sekitar has a rough estimate, but no one knows exactly the number. So when we are a regulated collector, we actually report our numbers to the Jabatan Alam Sekitar every 3 months. So that's how the Jabatan Alam Sekitar can tell in 2021 that we are the largest and we had a market share of 25% from the total and so on. So this is about the G. Then there is another part, which is our customers. So yesterday I was on stage with one of our customers, DHL. They are the 99th largest company in the world. They've been working with us since 2020, so this is our 4th year working together. And they said very clearly that working with us enhanced their sustainability reporting and enhanced their mission, the Go Green 2050 and so on. Why? It's because we not only report the data to the Jabatan Alam Sekitar, which is collective everything we do, but we also report back to our customers that, okay, DHL recycled with us so and so, this means a GHG emission reduction of X, diverted toxic metals from landfill Y, and so on. So all of this data goes back to the company and they can put it in whatever formula they want. So what is remaining is the S. So in 2019, when our service was starting off, it became clear to us that we're not going to be able to fulfill the demand using in-house drivers. Because even the incumbent, the company that we dethroned to the #1 spot, they have like 10 lorries, with 10 drivers and so on. And if they get like 500 orders in one day, which we sometimes do, they definitely cannot fulfill. So it became clear to us that the way to fulfill this demand is by Uberizing, allowing anyone who with a car to sign up as a hero, and then they will basically go and collect on our behalf. So today we have like on any given day more than 200 heroes which is bigger than the DHL Malaysia fleet, by the way, but we don't pay them the salary. We just pay them per collection, so that's why our cost base is low. But you are creating gig economy jobs. So by just making a booking to collect your e-waste, you divert from the landfill, you give someone a gig economy job, and you also give data to the government. As far as I'm concerned, that's ESG, all the three letters.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mo. We have a question on Slido that exactly asks what you already answered. So like, what can startups do to start embracing ESG in their operations? And I think this is a really good case study and a best practice that maybe if you were the one that asked the question, you can approach Mo later on to understand a little bit more, and of course Seau as well. So I think we are almost up for time. One last question to all of the speakers here. Just in a quick one-liner, what do you have to say to the audience today? What is the key takeaway that you want them to take from each and every one of you?
I'll be really quick, but can I go first? Can I just take a show of hands? Who thinks here that ESG, in most cases, is cost prohibitive at the moment? Can we see a show of hands? Okay, so we have a few hands. So ESG is expensive. Companies sometimes, most of the time, need to spend money to do it. So if we find one ESG activity that doesn't cost any money, in fact, in some cases, it might earn you money, like e-waste recycling. If your e-waste is valuable, we will pay you to collect it. Why don't everyone does it? Why is the recycling rate still 25%? And why don't you do it, maybe earn some money and use that money to subsidize your other ESG activities? So that is just my question to you. Please act now, tell your friends, do it yourself, and spread the word to your companies. Thank you.
I think takeaway for you guys would be what I've said earlier on, how we are spoiled by plastic, right? Where we find that in that spur of moment, we need the convenience, right? And hence, that is very justifiable for us to take a plastic bag, very justifiable for us to just take a plastic straw, right? But if you take a step back, then you realize maybe I don't really need a plastic bag. Maybe I can just drink from the cup, right? You just need to wait for that, I don't know, 10 seconds, 20 seconds. And at least that's what I do to myself, because sometimes I know we get the things, oh crap, I need a plastic bag, right? But what I do is I try to shove it in my pocket, shove it in my handbag to see whether I can just make do without that. That's why for us, it's not purely just straws we're talking about. It's more of our daily habit. What can we do in little ways to just cut down all these unnecessary items that by right we do not need, right? If we can work on that, then you realize that you do not need a lot of plastic stuff. And when you move away from plastic, you start to realize the new generation kinds of materials, actually, they're fine, right? Because when we stop depending on plastics and all those, right? And about ESG, I would like to add, actually most startups, even though at the forefront, you see that we're solving an environment problem, but the effect always trickles down to the S and the G. Like for example, when we buy the agricultural waste and byproduct, we're actually helping the farms as well. So that's the S portion. But it's almost impossible to shout out all the different kinds of problems we're solving. That's why at the forefront, we're always solving one problem, but throughout our whole business operations, we're solving the S and the G as well. So this is something that you have to dive deeper, or you can just find out from your founder and you realize, hey, we're solving the S and the G as well, but we don't just put it out front, right? That's all.
Yeah, I think there's a link between the last question and one of the ones on Slido as well. So, the theme that we always hear as well is, the concern about, or the complication with sort of adopting ESG, and then the over focus on E. And I think the one thing to take away, or at least if there's one thing I can impart, especially for founders here or those who are thinking of doing a startup, there's really only two companies in this country that needs to solve E. It's Tenaga and Petronas. That's it, right? And true enough, if you look at the numbers, if they solve and they transition their entire business, we solve about half of our carbon emissions as a country. So that gives you an idea of the scale. Everyone else what I say to my founders or everyone that we speak to, and I hope this is something that can resonate with you, if you just be a responsible corporate citizen, you just build a company that's going to build value not just for yourself and your shareholders, but for society, for your stakeholders, for downstream. You are going to be sustainable by nature, because the nature of most startups today is that you're not really a culprit to begin with, unless you tell me that you're creating a new startup now to be better at mining petroleum and stuff like that, right? Which you won't get any investment anyway, I can guarantee you. So don't worry too much about it. Just be a good corporate citizen, build a company that is fit for the future, and that's really all you have to do. Everything else will follow.
Yes, I agree with Hardesh when he mentioned earlier that generally the large enterprises are the ones that should be primarily responsible to ensure ESG compliance. And looking at the general trends among major regulators around the world, whether it's in the US, in the UK, the shift is moving from voluntary disclosure towards mandatory disclosure. So if you are a young, early stage company, you may directly or indirectly be affected. For example, Mo is obviously supplying to a major business, and having that framework in terms of appreciation of the infrastructure that requires, from the data collection to the disclosures, will be particularly useful when it comes to integrating the business if you have the opportunity to work with large enterprises, which I'm sure that will be the case as a young company. So thank you.
All right, thank you so much to all our panelists. I think just to summarize and wrap it up, there definitely is a lot of opportunity within sustainability and ESG, especially when the big companies are championing it. Startups can be there to provide the solutions, to complement and to give that extra nudge for them to be part of their sustainability journey as well. So thank you, everyone. If you want to reach out to any of them, they will be here for until the end of the sessions today. Okay, thank you.